Clark Gable was the king of Hollywood. He had a remarkable career with over 60 leading roles in various genres for 3 decades. However, despite his achievements, there have been several rumors particularly regarding his alleged partial black ancestry and relationship with Hattie McDaniel. Recently, Gable's children have spoken out about the rumors and have also confirmed another rumor about his secret child. Watch this video to find out about the rumors Clark Gable's children confirmed. Before we uncover some of the rumors confirmed by Clark Gable's children, let's take a moment to explore the early events that shaped him and influenced the decisions he made throughout his life. Early life. Born in Cadiz, Ohio in 1901, Gable's entry into the world was marred by a series of unfortunate events. It started with the very day he came into the world. His birth certificate ended up being a bit of a mess due to his doctor's illegible handwriting, listing his gender as both male and female. And just when things seemed to settle down, something more unfortunate happened. After just 10 months, Gable's mother passed away suddenly, leaving Gable without the love of a mother. To fill the void left by his mother's passing, Gable's father remarried when he was just 2 years old. But while many might think that having a stepmother could be a recipe for disaster, Gable's experience was quite the opposite. His stepmother, Jenny Dunlap, played a pivotal role in shaping the man he would become. Jenny made sure that Gable received a good education, dressed well, and maintained a polished appearance. She even introduced him to the works of Shakespeare, instilling in him a love for literature and the arts. But while Jenny was busy shaping Gable into a refined gentleman, his father took on the task of instilling more macho pursuits in him, such as hunting and physical labor. However, it seems that Gable had his sights set on a different path altogether. At the tender age of 17, Gable discovered his love for acting, but life had other plans for him. His first obstacle was the terrible financial situation of his family. But that became the least of his problems when, at the tender age of 19, Gable experienced the devastating loss of his cherished stepmother, Jenny Dunlap, who passed away at the young age of 46. Forced to grow up too soon, Gable found himself in his father's oil field to make ends meet. But deep down, he knew he wanted more. And eventually, he got what he wanted. But not without some scandal along the way. Clark Gable's scandalous struggle for recognition. Gable eventually left his father's field and headed off to the Pacific Northwest. And to survive, he did all sorts of odd jobs. Working with traveling tent shows, toiling away in lumber mills, you name it. But then, something unexpected happened. While on one of these gigs, a coworker convinced him to give acting another shot. And this coworker also introduced him to a stunning actress named Franz Dorfler. They hit it off, and before you know it, they were engaged in hitting the road with a traveling theater group. After they settled down in Portland, Oregon, Dorfler thought it would be a swell idea to introduce Gable to an acting coach named Josephine Dillon. Little did she know, this decision would turn their lives upside down. You see, Dillon, who was 17 years older than him, took Gable under her wing and started coaching him. She helped him with his voice, diction, and body control. But there was a catch. Dillon wasn't just interested in furthering Gable's career. She also started footing the bill for his expenses. And as if things couldn't get any more complicated, Gable ended up leaving his fiancée for his much older acting coach. But their story didn't exactly have a fairy tale ending. Josephine Dillon spent what felt like an eternity grooming Gable for the glitz and glam of Hollywood. Finally, she decided he was ready for the big screen. So she packed her bags and headed to Los Angeles to start a theater company, all to give Gable that much-needed stepping stone. And guess what? 5 months later, he joined her. To top it all off, the two lovebirds tied the knot and even lied about their age difference on their marriage certificate. The truth was simply too much to bear, so they narrowed it down to a much more respectable 10 years. But that's not where the scandal truly begins. It was crystal clear that Dillon had imparted more than just acting skills to Gable. She had equipped him with a whole arsenal of tricks of the trade. But she had no idea he was about to put these lessons to scandalous use. As Gable started his acting career, it became apparent that he had a dirty little trick of using older mentors to get ahead. Some sources even claimed that he went as far as having affairs with both men and women to boost his career, cozying up to stars like William Haynes and wealthy actress Pauline Frederick. In fact, Pauline not only gave him a part in her play, she also bought him a car, and all the while he was still married to Dylan. But as Gable's insatiable appetite for success drove him into several affairs, it took a toll on his marriage to Dylan. The cracks began to show, and in 1929 the pair decided to part ways, but this didn't stop Gable from moving on. In fact, he became more determined and finally landed his first film contract with Path Pictures. True to his form, Gable wasted no time in finding another rich, older woman, Maria Langham, an heiress who was also 17 years older than him. Just days after finalizing his divorce from his first wife, Dylan, Gable tied the knot with Langham. At first, it seemed like he had settled down, but it wasn't long before his eyes started wandering again. Shortly after their wedding, Gable landed another film contract, this time with the major player, Warner Brothers. However, it seemed that Gable's charm wasn't enough to win over everyone. Warner Brothers had signed him, but one of their VIPs, Daryl F. Zanuck, had a less than flattering opinion of Gable. Zanuck said Gable looked like an ape, and his ears were quite big. At this period of Gable's life, it seemed like he would face another period of struggle to secure good roles, but fate had other plans. Gable's first big break came with his starring role in Dance Fool's Dance, opposite the legendary Joan Crawford. But this wasn't just any casting choice. Crawford specifically requested Gable as her leading man. And as the old adage goes, be careful what you wish for. Crawford, known for her strict rule against on-set romances, couldn't resist the allure of Gable's charm and broke her own rule for him. The affair between Gable and Crawford sent shockwaves through Hollywood, particularly since both were married at the time. But their undeniable chemistry on and off screen couldn't be ignored, and they went on to star in a total of 8 films together. And despite the fact that the MGM studio head Louis B. Mayer tried everything in his power to stop this affair, he didn't succeed. In fact, Gable's love escapade became worse. Living the Playboy lifestyle. The MGM studio head, Louis B. Mayer, found himself in quite the predicament when Gable and his co-star Joan Crawford refused to call it quits on their relationship. Mayer was left with no choice but to issue a threat. Either they end it or face the consequences of being fired. But Gable, being the smooth operator that he was, had other plans up his sleeve. After parting ways with Crawford, Gable found himself entangled in a brief fling with the enchanting Marion Davies. However, this affair was short-lived, and Gable's mischievous ways soon led him into the arms of other women. But this time it was different. When Gable appeared opposite the captivating Carole Lombard in No Man of Her Own, he surprisingly refrained from making a pass at her. Lombard, well aware of Gable's reputation, was surprised by his unusual restraint. Years later, fate brought Gable and Lombard together once more at a glamorous ball. This time, Gable didn't hold back. In a bold move, he invited Lombard back to his hotel room, laying his cards on the table. Her response? Nothing short of iconic. "Who do you think you are, Clark Gable?" Lombard said. But even with her sassy response, this encounter was the beginning of a legendary romance. And from that moment on, it seemed as though Clark Gable and Carole Lombard were inseparable. His first 2 marriages were more about convenience than love as he sought financial support from his wealthy wives. But everything changed after he won an Oscar, and he no longer needed to rely on anyone else. Once he met Lombard, it was clear that she was the one for him. Despite still being legally married, Gable and Lombard didn't hide their affection for each other. After a costly and drawn-out divorce from his second wife, Gable was finally free to marry Lombard. Just 13 days after his divorce was finalized, they tied the knot in 1939 during a break from filming Gone with the Wind. The newlyweds wasted no time in setting up their dream home, purchasing a ranch in California where they could live their best lives together. They affectionately called each other Ma and Pa and filled their home with chickens and horses. With Lombard by his side, Gable finally found the freedom to be himself and enjoy life to the fullest. And it wasn't just his love life that was taking off. His career was soaring too. Rise to fame. Clark Gable made it big, But it wasn't an easy journey, that's for sure. He had to work hard to get noticed and land some good roles. But just when things were starting to look up, he hit a major roadblock. During the filming of Dancing Lady back in 1933, Gable ran into some serious dental trouble. He got an infection in his gums called puria, and it was so bad that he had to have almost all of his teeth removed right away. Not only did he have to deal with the pain and recovery from the surgery, but the production of the film also faced some serious setbacks. It ended up going way over budget, costing over $150,000 extra. And while he was still getting back on his feet, MGM decided to loan him out to Columbia Pictures for a comedy called It Happened One Night, directed by Frank Capra. At that time, it was a low-budget film, so no one expected much from it. But you know what? That move paid off big time. Gable's performance in the film was so impressive that he ended up winning the Academy Award for Best Actor in 1934. And on the very day Gable collected that prestigious award, he did something that just melted everyone's hearts. See, he had been grinding in Hollywood for over a decade, and now he finally had his big break. But when a young fan admired his award, Gable didn't think twice about handing it over to the kid. He told the little one that what really mattered to him was the honor, not the statue. When Gable eventually made his way back to MGM, he was an even bigger star than before. Among his many successes, one of the third highest-grossing films was Gone with the Wind. From the moment he set foot on set, he knew he was in good company. In fact, he found a friend, Hattie McDaniel. Despite the fact that McDaniel was a female co-star, according to Gable, it wasn't romantic at all. Instead, it was a friendship built on mutual respect and admiration. Hattie McDaniel was a black woman, and in those days that meant she faced severe discrimination. But Gable stood by her through thick and thin, defying the norms of the time. Of course, there were those who speculated about Gable's motivations. Some suggested that his support for Hattie was due to his own black history. But how true is this? The untold story of Clark Gable's heritage. You might not know this, but Clark Gable was actually part black and Native American. Even though the studio may have preferred to keep it under wraps, the truth is that Gable proudly embraced his black and Native American roots. Not to mention his lineage also included a mix of Pennsylvania Dutch, Belgian, and even German ancestry. But Gable wasn't just paying lip service to his heritage. He was a vocal advocate for integration and equality. When his co-star Hattie McDaniel, the first African-American to win an Academy Award, was barred from attending the premiere of Gone with the Wind in Atlanta, Georgia, Gable threatened to boycott the event. On another occasion, Gable took a stand against segregation when he witnessed separate colored and white bathrooms on set. He refused to work until all the cast and crew were treated equally. Now some people say that Gable's mixed heritage didn't really have much to do with his support of Hattie. According to them, Gable was simply ahead of his time. He didn't see people based on the color of their skin, so he valued Hattie for who she was as a person. It wasn't about black or white for him. It was about friendship and loyalty. In fact, Gable and McDaniel were so close that he even pulled a prank on her during a scene in Gone with the Wind. He secretly swapped her usual tea with a strong drink without her knowing. Sadly, not everyone treated McDaniel with the same respect as Gable did, but he stood by her, and they stayed friends for life. Clark Gable's heartbreaking loss. You remember Carole Lombard, Clark Gable's true love. Well, their love story took a tragic turn that left Gable devastated. It all went down in January 1942, when Lombard was heading back to Los Angeles from a bond drive in her home state of Indiana. She was on a plane with her mom and press agent when the unthinkable happened. The plane crashed and everyone on board lost their lives. When Gable got the news, he rushed to the Nevada mountain where the crash happened, and his reaction was just heart-wrenching. Gable was so overcome with grief that his friends had to hold him back from trying to climb the mountain. And when they finally found Lombard's body, he couldn't hold back his tears, saying, he ended up living in the home they shared in Encino for the rest of his days. Even though he tried to move on, his heart never really left Lombard. But it wasn't long till he resumed another affair with actress Virginia Gray. They were spending so much time together that rumors started spreading that she might become the fourth Mrs. Gable. but they were all in for a surprise. Back in the 40s, Gable and Gray were inseparable, with many speculating that a proposal was forthcoming. However, Gable's roving eye led him to date other women, leaving Gray patiently waiting for a commitment that sadly never came. Out of the blue in 1949, Gable got married to Lady Sylvia Ashley while he was still dating Gray. The news sent shockwaves through Hollywood, leaving Gray heartbroken and the public in disbelief. The sudden marriage was surrounded with a lot of mystery, and everyone expected what happened next. Lady Sylvia Ashley was nothing like Gable's previous wife, Carol Lombard. She was all about spending lavishly, throwing fancy Hollywood parties, and she didn't even care about anything Gable liked. It was a total mismatch. Eventually, things started to fall apart pretty quickly. Not long after their first anniversary, Gable had had enough and demanded a divorce from Lady Sylvia. And when they finally went to court to end things, Gable revealed something to his friends. He straight up told his friends that he must have been drunk when he proposed to her. And when the divorce was finalized, Gable's visible relief spoke volumes about the tumultuous nature of their relationship. Despite his freedom from Lady Sylvia, Gable's romantic troubles were far from over. The tabloids continued to speculate about his love life, dissecting every rumored fling and potential romance with fervent curiosity. Everyone was dying to know who's next on Gable's list. But after his recent divorce, women weren't exactly at the top of his priority list. He had a bigger problem: career challenges. You might think that after his iconic performance in Gone with the Wind, Gable's career would have been smooth sailing. But the truth is, MGM had a tough time finding roles that could match Gable's star power and the attention he was getting from fans and the media. This left Gable feeling frustrated with the studio that had made him a household name. Eventually, in 1954, after 23 years with MGM, Gable parted ways with the studio. This marked a significant turning point in his career, and he never quite reached the same level of success as before. Despite all these challenges, Gable started another affair in 1954 with Kay Williams, who had recently gone through a divorce. They decided to elope in Nevada with only a small group of friends and family present. This relationship felt different from his previous marriages, and for a while, Gable seemed genuinely content. But, as fate would have it, their happiness was short-lived. During one of his movie premieres in 1955, Williams appeared visibly pregnant, but sadly, she suffered a miscarriage soon after. Despite this heartbreak, Gable remained devoted to Williams's children from her previous marriages but longed to have a child of his own. They continued to try for a baby, and in 1960 Williams became pregnant again. However, their hopes for a blissful family life were dashed once again, and to make matters worse, Gable's career wasn't doing any better. The films he appeared in were largely forgettable, with no truly remarkable performances to speak of. But in 1960, the bad days were finally over for his career. Gable embarked on a new cinematic journey with The Misfits. Starring alongside the iconic Marilyn Monroe and Montgomery Clift, the film eventually achieved iconic status, but it came with a catch. Filming The Misfits took place in the scorching desert heat, and despite Gable's old age, he insisted on performing his own stunts. But there was another icon who everyone was looking after: Monroe. In fact, there were medical personnel on set just for Monroe because she was going through a traumatic divorce from the film's scriptwriter, and Clift was also struggling with heart problems. Ironically, it wasn't the actors who ended up needing medical assistance. The death of Clark Gable. Just 2 days after wrapping up filming on The Misfits, the legendary Clark Gable suffered a heart attack that would ultimately claim his life. Rumors had been swirling about Gable's health during the shoot, with many noting a significant change in his voice and the insurance company requiring him to kick his smoking and drinking habits before they would sign off on his casting. Despite these warning signs, no one could have foreseen the tragic turn of events that followed. After suffering a heart attack, Gable found himself in the hospital with his loyal wife Williams at his side. One fateful night, as Williams took a much-needed rest, the doctor woke her up with a crushing news. Gable had passed away. He passed away that night from a second heart attack caused by an infection. Sadly, the medical staff refrained from performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation out of fear that it could further harm Gable's fragile heart, and to make matters worse, a defibrillator was not available. To add another layer of heartbreak, Williams was 4 months pregnant at the time, leaving Gable to never meet the child he had longed for. In March 1961, Williams gave birth to a boy named John Clark Gable, but was John really Clark's only biological child? The truth about Clark Gable's unknown child. Back in 1935, during the filming of The Call of the Wild, the leading lady Loretta Young found herself in a bit of a predicament. It turns out she became pregnant with Clark Gable's child, and it was rumored that their short affair took place on an overnight train from a studio location to Hollywood. Now Young, being a devout Catholic, had to come up with a clever idea to hide her pregnancy. So she came up with a story that she was touring through Europe and then conveniently needing some rest upon her return. Fast forward to November 6, 1935, and Judy Lewis, their daughter, was born in Venice, California. But Young decided to send Judy off to a Catholic orphanage, all part of her elaborate plan. Lewis spent 19 months moving around orphanages, completely unaware of her true parents. Then the next thing we heard is that Young reached out to gossip columnist Luella Parsons to announce that she was looking to adopt not one, but 2 girls from a Catholic orphanage. In the end, she only adopted one, her very own daughter, Judy. Now, according to Judy herself, the adoption was merely a smokescreen, so no one would suspect that the adopted girl was actually her biological daughter. But as Judy grew up, she couldn't help but wonder about her biological parents. Every time she asked Young about her mother, she got the runaround. And as for her father, Young claimed he was deceased. But then, in 1950, something remarkable happened. Gable paid a visit to Young's house and had a brief encounter with Judy. He even gave her some cash and told Young to buy Judy a proper bed, but he had no idea at the time that she was his daughter. As Judy entered adulthood, she found herself struggling with feelings of confusion and isolation within her own family. It wasn't until 5 years after Gable's passing that Young finally came clean. She confessed to Judy that she was indeed her biological mother, and that Gable was her father from an affair. Young's plan may have saved her and Gable's careers back in the day, but it certainly made Judy's life miserable.